Hey everyone, Norm from Tested here, and happy Friday. Today I have a fun show and tell, and hopefully, fingers crossed, a successful project as well. And we're going to be talking about lightsabers. So, if you're like us, big Star Wars fan, maybe you grew up with one of those flashlight lightsabers, or maybe some of us just had like tape measures that we would pretend to be a lightsaber. And the kind of lightsaber technology in terms of the prop replicas and what the fan community has come up with has really taken advantage of modern electronics to a point where I had no idea how cool and how robust and how featureful the lightsabers that you can assemble yourself or pick up from like an RPF run these days. Like we're way beyond the days of screwing on a tube to a flashlight or even having an LED light shine up some type of translucent tube. So what I have here is a lightsaber prop replica. And this comes courtesy of the Saber Bay. I'll have a link to their site below. And basically, they're a distributor and maker of different parts that you can use to put your own lightsaber together. It's a machined hilt. Of course, here this is Luke's lightsaber from Return of the Jedi. It's not quite weathered yet, and that may be a future project. But this uses the latest in terms of the electronics the community has developed. Let's go flip it on so you can see exactly how it works. Like this is a Neopixel Blade. There is a row of LEDs in here that's all programmable. That's what's giving it this vibrant flickering effect. It's RGB, and so you have controls that you can even use to change the color of the blade. Let's get it back to maybe a blue, right? Even though it doesn't exactly match canonically the hilt. You heard there were some sound effects there. There's actually a speaker built in, and you can do really cool things like press a button and pretend you're deflecting some blaster fire. And it actually changes the color of the blade to a randomized location to where you would imagine a blaster fire hitting the blade. And of course, it has a gyroscope inside. So as you swing it, as you even knock onto different objects, you actually get cool sound effects. And all of that is housed in this hilt. This inch-long blade here has electronics, and it's actually removable very easily. So what we can do is we can just take this Allen key, and oh, that actually activated it with the gyro. But it's actually a good example of showing you how the technology works, because as I remove the blade, you can see it actually powers it off. There's no battery in the blade itself. The battery is all housed here. And then you can see on the bottom of the blade it has a series of contact points in concentric circles so that it doesn't have to be mounted in exactly one way. I mean, they've thought of everything, the fan community, in making this type of lightsaber design. If you look down the hilt, you can actually see a series of pins. I can show you that in the close-up here. And that's what powers and controls the LEDs, the NeoPixel lights inside the blade. There's actually also a row of lights here. So if I activate it, it's extremely bright, but this light doesn't actually illuminate the blade. It's just for display purposes. And while I have it on, I can even show you some of the electronics on the inside. And so it just unscrews. We want to make sure we do it without the blade on so it doesn't bend electronics. And it's a 3D printed housing here with an SD card. You can load profiles. There's even a tiny display here, and you can configure everything from the profile for how the blade will go up, how it will react to the gyro, to sound effects, to music, and even lights on the side. Like I said, it is an amazing piece of technology that I just didn't even realize was something accessible to fans. So thank you to the Saber Bay for giving us a heads up about all this amazing technology. But today, I also want to find a proper way to display this. And I'll be honest, I've looked around the internet, I looked on Etsy, and I haven't been really pleased with the display options for your standard lightsaber hilt. A lot of lightsabers come with, your laser cut acrylic displays. Typically, they have a base and maybe two mounting points and really simple design, and you kind of plop it on and it holds and grips it. But I think we can come up with something a little more fun, a little more thematically interesting and appropriate and worthy of this amazing lightsaber. And so let's go draw a design and see if we can come up with something that I can use on my laser cutter with some of the materials I have here at home to make a cool lightsaber stand. So I have my notepad here for sketching out a design. And as I said before, a lot of lightsaber display stands are pretty standard. So you have some type of rectangular base, and maybe you have a way to hold the blade or the hilt in two mounting points. And that's a pretty standard design. If you Google and you look at what's offered at Galaxy's Edge, for example, they have a lightsaber stand design. It's a little bit different, and I'm going to use that as an inspiration. There's still some type of base, but as opposed to holding the hilt horizontally or parallel to the base, they actually have it at an angle. And so they have kind of a ramp and then little clips that you clip on, and then your hilt goes on that, like that. So I like this design, and we're gonna riff on that. And the elements should be fairly simple. So what I'll need, of course, is some type of base. We'll go with, say, a rectangular design with some curved corners. And for this ramp here, for this angled stand, we'll cut some acrylic at an angle, design in Illustrator. And so in a profile view, maybe something like so. Very basic. And then we'll have two mounting points that will hold the lightsaber. And we have opportunity to do some fun design here. So the way this would mount here, it maybe slots in. Maybe I'll have two of these in parallel to give it a little more width and robustness. But there's all this area here that I can maybe do an inlay and a design. So I'll look around and see if there's some Star Wars iconography that I can place in here. I'm thinking mixed media is what I'm really into right now. So a mixture of maybe some walnut and some acrylic. I love clear acrylic, but I also just got in some color, some teal acrylic that could also work and offer a nice contrast to the warmness of a walnut wood. And because I'm just doing all this design in Adobe Illustrator, it'll be really easy to match up the laser cuts with some inlays so I can have acrylic inset into wood. Now, one of the things I've been experimenting with recently with my laser cutting projects is going beyond the standard 1/8 inch thick material. 1/8 inch cuts really reliably on the Glowforge, and it's really great for constructing boxes. You can do all sorts of fun designs. This is something I picked up recently as a design on Etsy. It's a wonderful box, right? And it's all just 1/8 inch acrylic. And it's beautiful construction, even does a good job of hiding some of the telltale signs of it being laser cut. But I'm also a fan of mixing up the thickness of material too. If you work with plywood, if you're doing some woodworking, you're gonna use thicker material. If you're doing some machining or CNCing, you're gonna use inch thick material, and I can't cut that thick of material on the home laser cutter, but I can stack sheets of material, and I can cut up to 1/4 inch clear acrylic is what Glowforge sells. So I have some of that as well, and I've had a lot of success lately stacking clear acrylic with an opaque acrylic or maybe wood and creating something that's 3/8 inch thick, which is a little bit more robust, so feels more like a substantial thing. So I think in my design, I'm gonna keep that in mind, have things about 3/8 inch thick as opposed to 1/8 or 1/4 inch, and then build out from there. Now, before we get started, we're going to figure out the scale of our stand. And looking at this hilt, it's basically 11 inches long. That's pretty great because the material I'm going to be able to cut with is essentially 11 inches by 19 inches. So I can make, if I want something as long as this hilt, I can absolutely do that without having to waste material. And then the diameter of the contact points, I feel like I want to have a brace here and then maybe another one down here. So let's double check how thick that is. So that's just over half an inch right there, 0.57. So it can go up to, yeah, as long as it's under about an inch, it'll be able to hold that. And then down here, we have a little less wiggle room, 1.3 inches at its thinnest point, and then 1.46 inches at the thickest point. So somewhere in between 1.35 inches, it'll be able to basically hold it like that. And then the spacing is going to be important as well, the spacing between those mounting points. I'm going to build that into the design. And so basically they're about 7 inches apart. I don't think I need the angle of that stand. You know, if I'm going to have it hold it here, I don't need it to stick out beyond the tip of that hilt. So maybe if this is 11 inches, let's like have it 9 inches. Yeah, 9 inches will be about there. It's going to look like that. And then the base, like if you look at this cutting mat is 12 inches. Again, I don't think I want the base to take away from the beauty of the lightsaber, so I don't want it to crowd it. I want it to maybe be a little bit smaller, so the most prominent thing is still the hilt. So because this is 11 inches, let's go with a 10-inch base. Scale is one of those things that unless you're looking at something physically, it's tough to get a sense of on the computer screen. Like I could open up Illustrator and I can create a rectangle that's 10 inches by 6 inches, and it'll look right on the screen, but until I do the laser cut or until I do a physical measurement, it's not gonna feel like exactly, I'm not gonna get a good sense of exactly how it will look compared to the physical object. So I'll do my best guess here of maybe a 10-inch by, let's say, 6 is gonna be way too wide. Let's say a 4-inch wide base, 10 inches by 4 inches. I'll still have a little bit of presence. I can still do some inlay design. I definitely want to have stacked materials. One of the lessons I learned early on is my base can't just be an 1/8 inch thick. I may want to elevate it off of the surface or stack a couple pieces, maybe do a 2/4 inch thick clear pieces of acrylic and then sandwiched by 2 1/8 inch sheets. I'll give it a nice solid feel because I can't cut thick plywood on the laser cutter, nor would I want to. But we have our parameters. We have basic dimensions to start off with. So let's head over to Illustrator now and get to designing. Okay, so a little bit of time has passed, and I think I might have went a little overboard with the design. I kept on wanting to add more and more and had more ideas as I was just staring at the screen. So here's what I got so far. Let's take a look at what I've laser cut. So I got that teal acrylic and I decided to cut it out. And if you recognize this star, it's actually a crop of the Jedi logo. So as the painting, looking at some iconography, and the Rebel Alliance logo could be appropriate, but I think this actually is a little more distinct, and actually for the color, for the teal, may actually be closer to the actual color that you see in the film. So went with that. Typically, it has these wings that come out, but I think having it within this 4-inch by 10-inch frame is going to make it look unique. So this is my top layer, and as I said, I really want to experiment with inlays, and so also laser cut some walnut, and this basically fits in right there. And I have the other cut piece that I haven't quite peeled off yet. We'll do that in a bit. And then I also wanted to have some negative space, and not exactly if I wanted to fill that with the same teal. So I did cut a piece of teal, but also I cut some frosted acrylic because I just had some extra laying around, and that perfectly does an inlay right there. So already you can tell the base has some interesting accent design. I like just adding this little bit of accent right there, a little bit of like a digital look almost. The teal I think looks really nice, and then the contrast between the walnut and the teal also looks pretty cool. But like I said, this is 1/8 inch thick right now, and if I had the hilt sitting here, this is almost like not even as thick as this cutting mat. And so I want to have some layers. And so to service that, I cut some 1/4 inch thick acrylic to stack on top of it. And it looks kind of weird and squiggly because I had an idea as I was going through the design. But let me kind of give you the stacking order right now. So you have clear acrylic, which I'll peel off that protective covering. You have the teal with the inlaid graphic on top. But as I was laser cutting this frosted acrylic accent, it made me think, well, if that's going to be frosted acrylic, which is translucent, and I have clear acrylic under it, then why not add some lights? I could actually have this illuminated somewhat. And so that's exactly what I've planned for. I have this clear acrylic, and you can see I haven't even talked about that ramp yet. I've designed in slots so that that kind of holder can rest in here. But at the same time, I've laser cut out a channel here that I believe, if I just take my favorite cheap off-the-shelf LED strip. This is left over from the recent project I did lighting my display cabinets. I actually line the inside of this display, the base, with an LED strip, and it'll illuminate outward, and then it'll make it look like it has an illuminated base. So I have multiple cut sheets of this clear acrylic to give it some height. Right here, that's at least 1/2 inch thick. That's going to give it some presence. And then for the ramp, same thing. I went with some teal. I think some clear acrylic backed with teal is going to look cool. But at this point, I got to tear off a bunch of this protective covering and get to assembling, which I guess we can do in time lapse. are done, and I'm pretty happy with how this went. This is one of those things where it was all in my head, in my notebook, sketched out, and as I was designing it in Illustrator, doing the vectors, I kept wanting to go further and further, changing up the design, adding more inlays, adding weird cutouts here and there. But the basic premise was the same. I wanted it to have some thickness and some heft using a combination of the 1/4 inch acrylic with also this teal acrylic. And as you can see, also embedding an LED strip to give it a little bit of illumination, which I think is cool. Something I didn't expect, the 1/4 inch acrylic, it's just optically completely clear when you look at it through the sides. So you can actually see the LED strip. And the way I had it first tested, I had the diodes pointing outward. I can see the individual diodes, so I decided just to flip it, and so you can actually see the underside of the LED strip, which kind of looks cool. It looks like some circuitry there, and then light shoots inside. A little bit of light bleed comes out the top here, which works for me. And then something I really like is this incline, this holder on an incline on this ramp here. Again, completely inspired by the lightsaber holders you can get at Galaxy's Edge, but now I have my own take on it. And the measurements were all correct, thankfully. And it perfectly holds this hilt, which I can even activate some of the electronics to have the sounds and lights on display. Yeah, pretty pleased with this. I can just plug into power when I need it to, and when it sits on the desk here, it doesn't take up a big footprint, and it's just a nice display, again, for this hilt. You'll find links where you can find this kit as well as the components if you want to make your own lightsaber at the Saber Bay, and that's in the comments and description below. And if you're interested in this file, I can also upload that as well. So if you have a Glowforge or just a laser cutter and access to different thicknesses of acrylic or wood, you can also make your own. Well, thanks for joining me for this fun little project and just blowing my mind with how cool lightsabers are these days. Hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you next time. I don't need to make the wah-wah sounds. I'm gonna do it anyway. Wah, wah, wah.